Hey everybody, we're live. I am here, and I've got a special guest here today. I'm very excited to talk to you. Although I feel like it's all been overshadowed now. We've got a few things have happened.
Yeah, no, it is something. It is something else.
Before we get into all that, and we got some people in the room, and I think we'll have a decent crowd here tonight because I mean, I have done live streams now. And I don't do it that often, but everyone I've been on for the last, I would say, 6 months, you can't go for an hour without somebody asking, when is Bendis going to be taken off of a book? And that's been every week for 6 months. And now here we are. And I think that's going to be clearly what's on people's minds. But
so no questions tonight.
Yeah.
That's it. There's nothing to talk about.
Yeah. What am I doing? Actually, I can just take this off and there we go. But it's going to be a crazy time. Tell me, do this for a second, because I was excited to have you on because, I try, as I've said, I like to get a lot of different voices, perspectives, and I think you have an amazing amount of history in this book. You're also up for an award, so I want to talk about that. But
thank you.
Tell us about yourself, like for people who don't know you, tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure. I think a lot of people don't know me. I'm Joe Corallo, as I think it's displayed under my name. So, yeah, I've been on the periphery of comics for about a decade. I started trying to self-publish around like 2011, 2012, and then I really didn't start getting things published. Like I had an anthology I was in like 2014. I was doing some trying to think. I was writing columns for Comic Mix and doing some stuff for like Geeks Out, Geek.com, things like that. And then 2017 is when I put out through Comic Mix the Mine anthology to benefit Planned Parenthood, which I co-edited with my friend Molly Jackson. And we got to work with a lot of big names. We worked directly with people like Neil Gaiman, Gail Simone, Gabby Rivera, Mark Waid, Mara Wilson, Frank Conniff, for you Mystery Science Theater 3000 fans out there, Amber Benson, Louise Simonson, Annie Innocenti, Trina Robbins, a lot of really great people.
Yeah.
Mindy Newell, who's the first woman who wrote Wonder Woman, Catwoman, a lot of those characters starting in the 80s. And then that won the Ringo in 2018 for Best Anthology. And we were up for an Eisner too, which we didn't get, for Best Short Story about Ethel Byrne that Cecil Castellucci and Scott Chandler did, which we were happy about that. And then last year, I had my miniseries with Vault Comics, She Said Destroy, with Liana Kangas, who I think her first published work was actually in the Mine anthology. Yeah, and that's how we met. We met because we met at the Forbidden Planet signing for that Denny O'Neil came down for, which was really great to have him there. And we talked about that book and we're able to get that off the ground. But trying to think with that.
That's a lot of people. I mean, that's a lot of people. And I think some names in there, it's interesting. And one of the reasons I always enjoy talking with you is that you bring up names, you bring up people that, we don't talk about a lot, that had a huge influence in comics in the 80s and the 90s. And they're not, who isn't John Byrne or Jim Shooter? It's other people that also existed in the 80s and that still have a lot of relevancy today. I think it's a lot of cool people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, what was it? Paul Leviton, Joe Staten were also in the book. We had them do something together. Mine also had, June Brigman and Roy Richardson, like a lot of great people who have been involved in the industry for a very long time. Robert Greenberger. We got Rick Parker to letter something for it. I think a lot of people would recognize Rick Parker's name if you read like Spider-Man in the 80s.
Yeah.
And he's just a great, wonderful guy too. But yeah, it was great putting that book together. And then Liana and I ended up both being at Black Mask at the same time. she was drawing Black AF Devil's Die while I was editing Kim&Kim.
Gotcha.
And then, so we were doing that in 2018. And then 2019, we did She Said Destroy together at Vault. And now I'm allowed to say this. I can't go into too much detail, but Liana and I have a short we're doing at TKO that we co-wrote together that Paul Ezeketa is doing the art. Paul Ezeketa did Outcast with Robert Kirkman.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're really excited for that. There should be a release date on that soon. It's finished. And, I also have a bunch of other things in the works. I'm currently writing a couple of different unannounced books. And we also just wrapped Lost on Planet Earth, which was Max Assaggio and Claudia Guir Comixology Originals book. That was 5 issues. The last issue came out, I think, like 2 weeks ago. And so I've been doing a bunch of stuff, and I didn't even touch on Deadbeats yet. Organizing and editing the Deadbeats anthology, which I think some people may have heard of on the internet. But we got the Ringo nomination for that last week. We were excited about that.
Congratulations to you and the team, by the way, for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really nice, and it's funny. So, so thank you you've worked, Lisa. You've worked with a ton of people, and there's a bunch of names in there that I know the audience is probably super psyched about. But it's cool because I think these. Well, first of all, I think there's a lot of talented people in that mix that you talked about, and then also, it's good to get recognition. I think. This is going to sound like an oddball question for you, but
sure.
You've done a lot of anthologies, or not a lot, but you've done some anthologies.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm seeing more and more and more come out. There's it feels like as we're heading into 2021, there's going to be a lot of anthology. It feels like the industry is moving more and more in that direction with announcements from Marvel and DC and just the indies. Do you think that 2021 is going to be a lot of anthologies in comics?
I think we're getting more of those. I mean, the last few years, we've just seen more DC doing more and more of these anthologies, like alone, like not even like the Marvel stuff, which is we're also seeing some. But I mean, we're getting these like quarterly DC anthologies on top of this, like what was it, the Batman Black and White and the Harley Quinn Black, White, and Red, and all of that. I think. There's a few reasons for that. One of them, I think, for the big two at least, when you're dealing with getting people to get things in on time, and you're dealing with blocks of maybe anywhere from 6 to 10 pages, to get artists to hit those deadlines and get them in is easier than 20 plus pages.
Okay.
So I think, and you're also spreading the love a little bit. You're helping out more people by offering some of those opportunities, and I think for those reasons, you're seeing a lot more of those kind of anthologies popping up.
It makes sense. I mean, from a scheduling perspective and how things are moving and shifting. I mean, if somebody doesn't come in on time, you drop them. You can probably slot somebody in last minute if you needed to.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's also a way to get certain artists to commit to something like that. Like maybe you can't get Bill Sienkiewicz to do a full issue, but like maybe you could convince him to do 8 pages of a anthology. Like that kind of stuff. Yeah,
no, it makes complete sense. And hey, we got questions right what we're talking about. Do you think, I think this is a great question because it also fits all these anniversary issues that DC is doing right now, that they're, $10 a pop, and they've been really successful. I think it carried DC in many ways for the last 2 years in a lot of ways. You think that also is, I mean, that's got to be a factor to the publisher, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they're successful for that reason. I mean, as a customer, I'll pick some of that stuff up sometimes. Like I might not be picking up, let's say, I wasn't reading like Superman regularly when the 80th anniversary issue came out, but I picked that up. Like there's, people do that kind of stuff. And you see names you haven't seen in a while, you're like, oh, Devin Grayson and Mark Wolfman and, Wolfman and stuff like that. Like, yeah, I'll pick it up. And
Well, it feels like they get to kind of have their cake and eat it too a little bit. You get the current writing team, you get some classics, you get some people, coming in to write that maybe you're not used to the character, so you get to like play in all the different fields simultaneously.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. I think so. It's fascinating, kind of as the business is evolving, and I'd love to get into that with you. But I know that we should, because everybody wants to hear about it. So the big news today. So Bendis is off Superman Action Comics. What do you think? Was this expected, or they're kind of treating it like, oh, it's the end of his run, but it seems like it's coming a little faster than we were led to believe.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I'm not all caught up on that run. And I'll also say I actually liked what like James Robinson was doing right before he took over.
Yeah.
There was that like thing where like it was like him and Jonathan Kent, like they went into space to try to stop this similar thing that happened to Krypton, happened on this other planet, and that was a cute story. And there were a couple of other little things, but yeah, I kind of fell off a bit with the Bendis stuff. But I think I I feel like it's probably not as long as they maybe originally planned, but this does feel like it's maybe been in the works for a little while, if that makes sense. Like they were switching gears well before we heard this news, but not necessarily off the bat.
Yeah, I mean, so the word came out that we were getting, I think he said in June or July that his run was wrapping up. But then it was quickly followed up with not anytime soon. I've got a lot of story to tell. And now 6 months later, it's done. Yeah. And what I can't figure out is this because DC and I think this is this isn't an unfair criticism. Their marketing acumen has not always been top. So it's hard for me to say, was this like a screwy just messaging, or was this the plan all along, or did they speed things up? It feels, I don't know. I'm not sure what to make of all this.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like what likely happened was Bendis was being honest, and then he kind of had to roll back a little bit.
Yeah.
That seems like the most logical explanation. But I think something important to keep in mind here is at DC, I mean, this happens at a lot of places, but, and I don't want to, I'm not going to single anybody out. I'm not going to make it out like it's one particular person or anything like that. But
sure.
There have been multiple times, and you probably have similar stories to this, where you heard like, we're never going to publish this book. Not no way, not no how. We're never going to use these characters in the foreseeable future. And then 3 months later, the book's announced of exactly what they denied was never going to happen.
Absolutely. Happens all the time.
Yeah. So I don't think it's as crazy and as singular to Bendis as I think people are going to extrapolate it out to be. This happens with even very minor characters and very minor like titles.
Mm-hmm.
I will hear like, oh, well, like, we're never going to bring back the 7 Soldiers of Victory. We're never going to do that book again. And like, if someone at DC says that, you can like market in your calendar that anywhere from 3 to 6 months from then, the 7 Soldiers of Victory announcement's going to happen.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So I'm not shocked at all by that.
I'm often startled. I mean, you get these big companies, and it's like the biggest flaw. Well, not the biggest flaw, but I mean, from a retailer perspective and from fans, it feels like there's so much. I don't know, shooting yourself in the foot through messaging. And I'm astounded. Having you've worked in the indies, you've worked for some of the smaller publishers, and it feels like even these smaller publishers with like 1/20th of the staff often does a better job of just kind of messaging this stuff out. I don't know. I can never wrap my head around that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like part of that is also when you get to that like too many cooks in the kitchen sort of point, where you have books with multiple editors, and they go up the chain, and then there's that corporate level. So there's all sorts of opportunities for miscommunication. So, I think you run into that in a way that you don't at these smaller publishers, because in all honesty, a lot of these publishers have a skeleton crew running them. So to go up the chain is to maybe go up at most one person higher than you're talking to,
Yeah. Well, and there's been a lot of leaks that have come out of DC as well. I mean, with the 5G or G5 or whatever is ultimately going to be, always felt like a big debacle from a messaging standpoint. I mean, you had Bleeding Cool kind of that was leading the storyline or what that was going to be before DC even announced it, and then they're having to play catch up. It's I don't know. It's hard to kind of be able to gauge fact from fiction because you got so many people in that chain that is they feel like they have a vested interest in writing the story themselves. So it's hard to tell where the truth is.
Yeah, I mean, with anything at sort of that like big two level, like you're never going to find out the full truth because no individual person, for the most part, has full knowledge of everything outside of a couple of people. So you will never really get the 100% truth on so many of these things.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it feels like this has been a long kind of evolving story with Dan Didio being removed and then kind of the big changes that made. We have some new people coming in. Although I would say, what's your assessment? I've said this a bunch of times, but I feel like because I'm not in comics, people don't necessarily trust me. So I'm curious what you think. I mean, changes, how fast do changes happen? And I say it from the perspective of there's a new general manager, this Daniel Cherry, the third guy comes in, a week and a half roughly later, Bendis is off titles. I don't see those two as connected at all. Do you?
No, it can't be because of how long it takes to put these things out. Right. I mean, like I know, I'm not going to get into like specific titles or things like that, but just from knowing people, you hear about books from some of these creators that and they're not announced for like 6 months.
Yeah.
Often, so there really can't quite be a connection there, and these things do happen really fast because like I also know people, like for example, when like Dan was let go at DC, there were people who were actively talking to him about projects and things like that, like up until like a week before he left, so like these things do happen quickly, and then the things that are in the works were already in the works for like 6 months.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I did have somebody I was talking to. I don't remember if he said it publicly or not, so I'll not say who, but who had a call scheduled with Didio 2 days a little later, and and then Didio was released, I think, the next day, and so there is that kind of moment. But I have a hard time believing like some of these changes. Like the other one that was out is there's the the book that came out yesterday, The Digital First, that was looking at kind of racism and other topics in DC. And they're like, oh, clearly this was, Daniel Cherry spearheaded this because he's got this interest. It's like, he couldn't spearhead it, get it produced and published in a week. That's impossible.
No, yeah, it's not only is it literally impossible, but that kind of thing, to me, I have not read it, but the impression I get from something like that is it's like a corporate thing, from the top down to be like, hey, let's, get some messaging out there. Let's do that kind of thing. And it's not an edict on what monthly Superman and Batman comics are going to be. So I don't quite understand why people are having any reaction to that outside of, oh, it's, corporate's probably trying to like get something out there to like show support or interest in something.
Yeah. I think, I mean, it's these things take time. So how about Legion? Were you reading Bendis's? I mean, I believe from talking to you past, you're a big Legion of Superheroes fan, or at least you love that type.
The Silver Age stuff in particular, I'm a big fan of. Really, everything up to Crisis. There's stuff after Crisis I really like, but I think a lot of people who like the Legion will tell you that one of the few books that Crisis actually made worse instead of better was Legion.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, and there have been moments after that. I think what Dan Abbott, Andy Lanning, and Olivier Coipel did, particularly with Legion Lost, but a lot of their other stuff was very good. And you know, I mean, I also read the New 52 stuff because I'm just a big Legion fan. But I read that like the 2-part intro, which was like a Rose and Thorn book.
Yep.
And I was just kind of like, no. Like I read those two and I'm like, I might get back to it later, but I was just so not interested by that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it fills into that. It wasn't for me.
Yeah. I wasn't upset, but I was kind of like, I'm good. I'm all right.
Yeah, it's funny. Well, I mean, I want to throw one other topic at you real quick because it's
Sure.
and we can just. By the way, I'm having some nice whiskey here. How about yourself?
I am. I got some of that bullet bourbon. I'm enjoying quite a bit.
I think we wound up kind of you know, indirectly coordinating. I'm drinking some nice bullet bourbon here as well. I had the shelf, so it's a whiskey kind of afternoon. That's what
It really is. It's a wonderful time.
It's I also apologize if I cough at some point. It is the air quality here in Washington State is apparently, you know, we have fires everywhere, and I just got this alert. I've never seen this before on my phone, saying, "Hey, congratulations! If you walk outside for an hour, it's the equivalent of smoking 14 cigarettes right now."
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Oh no!
It's a mess. And I mean, it reminds me. I traveled over to Beijing about, I don't know, about 15 years ago, and very polluted at the time. I remember going back to a hotel room that night, like showering. You're just showering like smog off of you. And
oh God,
anyway, that's what we're having here. So sorry, yeah, for folks in California too. Yikes! I mean, this is a mess. So my heart's out to anyone dealing with this.
Oof, yeah, no, that's awful.
And also, I guess there's a few people I know that they're having some troubles in the stream. I'm seeing it's not me, it's not us. It's apparently YouTube's having some difficulties as well. So why not? So if it does interrupt for you, hopefully you catch it on replay. But I had a question for you because you've read so many of the historical comics. You have this. I mean, you got a lot of knowledge. You're one of the. You know everything. I mean, I would love to put you in that trivia contest against you know, Mr. Brevoort. That would be.
Oh God. I will say I have lost team trivia to Jordan White in the past. Not by much, but there was a coffee shop in New York that would do trivia, and I used to go to that for a little bit, and he was on one of the other teams, and like they always like won. It was awful. You know?
Not, you know, and no shade on anyone. I'm always surprised because I've seen Jordan White. I've met him certainly before, and he has a ton of knowledge about the industry, and I'm always surprised like more of that doesn't come out. Like it's all in there, and I mean, it's like I think the guy could go on Twitter and pretty much do a fact of the day every day for like 20 years and not run out. So.
Yeah, I think the first time I met him, he was still assistant editor on like the X books, and I have a couple of original pages, but I have an original page of what was it? One of the X Factor, I think a Manuela Lupacino page that I want to have him sign at some point, but yeah, I mean, he's always been super nice to me, and he's a wonderful, happy person in person. And I also used to see him go to this live recording of a podcast. It was he used to go to Comic Book Club Live in the city, and I'd see him there too. But yeah, he's a very knowledgeable person.
Yeah, it's important because I think there's a lot of criticism these days about you know, people working in comics who don't know comics, and some of that, in fairness, is the creators or the editors themselves, like going on to social media and saying, I've never read these books before, but let's give it a try. And it's, I don't know why you would tweet that, but
sure. Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting point because you do see that a lot where there's sort of this like mantra that's been repeated by certain aspects of the community that are all like, oh, well, you know, usually they're talking about either like SJW or people to the left, but you know, it's usually like, oh, this group of creators and editors, they don't read comics or they don't do this and that. And it's like you can find examples of that, sure.
yeah,
But
sure.
that's not necessarily the truth of the people they're talking about. And I mean, I know some creators that talk about things like, oh, I'd love to write this comic that I never read.
Yeah.
Like it does happen. It's not something that has never happened before. And I don't want to make people think that, but it's not this like systemic problem that some people make it out to be.
Yeah, it just feels like a few people have been noisy about it, and that then has kind of set the tone for, you know, everybody. But generally speaking, I mean, anyway. That it's always interesting to me. I do kind of agree with what you said, and having met Jordan White and everything else, like, that guy takes a lot of hits on Twitter, but he does know his stuff. He knows his history quite well, and if you run into him at a con, like. It is why it's always weird to me at Marvel that they bill Tom Brevoort as being kind of the master of all knowledge. Where, I mean, in a head to head, I'm putting my money on White. I'm just saying. But
no, I mean, I would, having lost to trivia to him and his team, I would too. And you know, beyond that as well, he, you know, not only being knowledgeable, he is very pleasant in person, and you know, he really does care, and he knows how it works at Marvel. You might not agree with how Marvel approaches things. Like, you know, I'm not too into the idea of like the sliding scale continuity.
oh yeah,
Where, you know, like I personally hate it. I'm not into this whole thing where like, oh, the Dark Phoenix saga happened like 8 years ago or whatever it is.
I hate that.
Yeah, because I've read that, and people weren't wearing bell bottoms in, you know, 2008 or whatever. You know, they weren't, and that stuff drives me nuts. But he knows it like the back of his hand. He knows all the dates and like, well, this event according to this continuity took place here. Like he knows it. Whether you like it or not, that's not the point. The point is he understands it all and knows how to implement it in the books.
It's true. No, I agree with you. I do, and I it's funny because I love what you said. There's a lot of perceptions. I think and I've done so many videos on it, too many probably, about kind of there's a divide between fans and the people in the business, and some of the perceptions I think that each group have of each other. You break it down, it's not true. I mean, just like hearing you, it bugs me as well. The sliding continuity drives me nuts, and I've talked to a lot of creators who feel that way, who say, you know, it's really not the biggest deal in the world if the Fantastic Four were, you know, operating in the Cold War era and they're still the same. I mean, like, who really cares? Is that really what we're going to worry about? Just keep moving.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what was it? It took Peter Parker like 2 years to go to college, and then he was in college for like 12 or so years. Like, I mean, more than that. Jesus, he was in college forever. But yeah, it's just like, you know, it is what it is.
Do you think this is a good question? So, do you think we're missing kind of this goes back into history. So these really talented writers kind of graduating to editors. Are we missing? Does that process really exist anymore? And maybe is part of the problem that financially that's just not a good career move?
You know, there's a few things here in play. I think one of the things was writers at the time would take the job of editor solely so they could get benefits. And you weren't getting, you know, you're getting benefits, you're getting regular work. And on top of that, writers weren't getting these royalties at the time. You know, that's something that kind of came later. So you made more money as an editor. So you'd get in as like a writer, and then if an editorial position opened, you'd take it. But now it's kind of the reverse. You know, you see people in editorial like Pete Tomasi go into being a writer because you can make more money that way.
Right.
You know, I think, you know, there needs to be some changes in how it works. I don't know what they are off the top of my head, but, you know, I think you need, you know,
it's a tough problem.
It's tough because, you know, at the same time, like we were just talking about with like someone like Jordan White, he knows his stuff. It's not like by not, you know, it's like I would trust him more than, you know, some of the top writers right now in terms of just knowing their stuff like the back of their hand. You know,
I think you've got problems, and it seems like there's definitely challenges in comics, but it feels like there's a lot of them, and so it's not like you could pull and fix one and then everything else falls into line. You've got a bunch of things all interconnected, and that's why it makes it so difficult to talk about. And then of course, you know, there's disagreements on what some of those problems are, which turn into fights. So it just feels like we're perpetually stuck.
No, it does, and that's also not to diminish the work that people like Denny O'Neil, Mark Grunwald, and people that were just mentioned did. They did incredible work as writers and editors, and
yeah, oh for
you
sure.
know, and honestly, Denny's legacy is probably going to be more as an editor than anything else, despite the great writing he's done. I mean, it's hard to compare a lot of the stuff he did to Dark Knight Returns, you know, Batman Year One, and things like that. Despite the fact that I love a lot of the, you know, Batman and Iron Man and other things he's written.
Yeah, I know. I agree with you. I think that is how it will shake out. But it feels like the whole system, kind of end to end, just has some issues, and it's going to be hard to repair that. It's you know, I mean, and also it's what are the exact problems that we're really trying to solve? Is it readership? Is it continuity? Is it basic mistakes? Is it, you know, there's just so many. So you have to really kind of identify what it is we're fixing when we're saying we're going to fix something.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, there's so many things that can be done, and I think too often people kind of hone in on like the one thing.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, if we only did this one thing, everything would get better. And even if that's not what people are actually saying, that's kind of what ends up getting across. And you hear people kind of repeat, like, oh, what we really need to do is this one thing. Like, if we could just get rid of Bendis, everything's going to be better. Even though there's that slight chance that, you know, someone that you don't like even more might take over the book. You know, it's you never know.
Which I guess we have some rumors that Mark Waid might take over that book.
Mark Waid is back at DC. He is doing one of the death metal tie-ins. So he could. I mean, maybe he could take over the book. He could end up doing another, maybe like a mini series, maybe another Birthright or something like that.
Yeah.
But no matter what anyone thinks or says about Mark Waid, you can't deny the fact that he thoroughly loves that character.
That's true. Yeah, no, he does have a passion. And I think the other thing that's been rumored for him is maybe going back to the Flash. And he does have a celebrated run on that character.
He absolutely does. I mean, you know, I wish I've read more Flash. Like I've read a little bit of Flash. I read like the Jeff Johns run and some other stuff. You know, I dip in here and there. It's something I feel like I need to invest more of my time in. But yeah, he absolutely has a history with the Flash that a lot of people still love and appreciate.
Yeah, it is fun. It's a good point though. It's you know, you can really kind of get fixated on one thing, and then, you know, hey, you know, it's a happy day. People are celebrating all over the place. It was funny because as I'm uploading that video and I hit, you know, it goes out to public. I'm like, this is, you know, sometimes, you know, this one will probably do well. And I'm watching the little graph. I'm like, yeah, here's and the euphoria, I would say, I was amazing. And I'm like, the entire time I'm watching that, I'm like, I don't know. I've heard from a couple of people now that there's at least a fairly even chance that Mark Waid gets a crack at the character. And it's like the roller coaster of emotion people are going to be on is always funny to me. But
yeah, no, I mean, it's a lot. And like Superman is a character. I absolutely love Superman. I still think of like Kurt Swan when I think of Superman. I love the Silver Age stuff. I read Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow and For the Man Who Has Everything probably at least once a year, if not a couple of times a year.
Those are great.
Yeah, it's some of my favorite stuff. Years ago, I gave my grandma what was it, Superman for All Seasons, and and she enjoyed that. I mean, that kind of stuff. Obviously, like All-Star Superman.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, he's a great character. I love him so much. There's a great book called It's Superman. And I'm going to name drop. I apologize. I've been drinking a lot of bourbon.
That's okay. I'm matching.
Yeah. But Howard Chaykin mentions that everyone should read this book, It's Superman. It's a prose novel that's all about what if Superman happened the year like in 1938, and like LaGuardia is the mayor of New York, and Lex Luthor's a corrupt alderman, and like it's so good. If you're going to read a prose novel, It's Superman. It's so good. I think it came out around 2004, but I loved every page. It's a wonderful read.
I think I was just checking it out. There's an audiobook available for that, as I recall.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, definitely. Like anyone who likes Superman, it's so good. I love that so much. I mean, but I also still think of like, Christopher Reeve and stuff like that when I think of Superman. But
yeah, no, me too. I mean, and it's cool to hear you say, because I mean, so many people portray, I think, current creators, writers, editors, and I think given the people you worked with, everything else, there's this narrative of like, well, those people don't care about the past, and all they care about is comics in the last 5 years. But again, I mean, your favorite stuff was further back than that, and that's most of us, right?
Yeah, and I mean, even like Batman. I mean, this is a bit of a hot take, but
it's where you love Tom King.
Yeah, I really love pre-crisis Batman. I love pre-crisis Batman. I think some of the best Batman stuff was the 70s, 80s, Bronze Age Batman stuff.
Yeah.
And there's enough of it in print. Like if you want a good time and you're not familiar with that age of like Batman, there's enough of that stuff in print, like the Neil Adams trades, volumes 2 and 3. You don't really need to read volume 1. There's not enough of the big stuff in it, but like volume 2, volume 3, the Tales of the Batman by Steve Englehart.
Yep.
Marv Wolfman, and then the 3 Jerry Conway volumes.
Yeah.
If you read all of that, like that's you're in for a treat if you never read any of that stuff. It is that's all the stuff that's in print. There's stuff like the Len Wein stuff that's out of print that you can get on Comixology, but like and if you can do it, and the Don Newton stuff, but if you want to hold the physical copies, those are in print, and you can get them on like cheapgraphicnovels.com or something like that, and they are it's a wonderful treat for yourself if you've never read that stuff.
I think those are some of the best books, and they don't get nearly enough praise. I mean, it feels like we get fixated on certain eras and then just stick there, and that's all we talk about.
Yeah, one of the things, like, and I'm a big DC guy. I love DC, and one of the things that kills me about it is there seems to almost be this like shame of like the pre-crisis era.
It's true. That's very true. It drives me crazy.
And it kills me because not only do I think a lot of the pre-crisis stuff is some of the best stuff they've ever done, but when you look at how quaint it is, like, oh, we had to do Crisis to kind of clean up some of this stuff, and you look at Batman now, it's a nightmare. There's like so many Batmans and Robins, and there's a huge family, and there's so many characters, and it's like, this is way more complicated than Batman was in like 1985, 86. Way more complicated.
No, it's true. It's totally true. And I think that goes to the, I mean, I don't know as a fan, and maybe you could help us out. You talk to a lot of people in the industry and other creators. Like, when you complain about this stuff, there's this knee-jerk, you're a hater kind of reaction. But I mean, I've had this exact same complaint. I remember getting into a fierce argument, both at a con and then online over this, of like this notion that the world was cleaned up post-crisis and now everything makes sense. It was so much easier to digest back in those times. It's a mess now.
It really was. And yeah, I'm seeing that one comment there. Laughing Fish. Oh, those two issues. I mean, I'm also a big Silver St. Cloud fan. I really enjoyed her. But yeah, all that Steve Englehart stuff with Joker, Rupert Thorne, Hugo Strange, that then Jerry Conway took and ran with in his run, was so good.
Yeah. It was legendary stuff. I think it's underserved, but it goes to. So here's a question I've got for you. I'm curious to get your take on it. I did a video on this, and there was a bunch of responses, and so I've been looking more further back into the 30s, the 40s, some of the old Shazam comics, some of the Young Allies comics, and there's some pretty significant, I would say, racist elements in those comics. I mean,
absolutely, yeah.
It's not. I don't think that's the debate. Like, Steamboat and some of those characters. I mean, you can't look at that and go, well, maybe they meant something else. I mean,
no, you're absolutely right.
Pretty cut and dry. So the question becomes this, and this is one of those things that's more complicated, I think, than people let on, is what do you do with those books? So first off, you have not many that are existing anymore. I mean, many of them have been lost to time and they're in collectors. So you still have a couple. You have an interest in people to go back and buy reprints of that era. But do you reprint those books or not? Well, I mean, I guess you have three choices. You can reprint them as is. You could go through there and in theory clean them up, although I don't know financially how that would even work. Yeah. Or you just keep them out of print. What do you do? Because I on one hand, you're like, for me, like as a collector, I'd want to see the originals, not because I'm, got a secret kind of racist trying to Shazam. Again, I can't quite picture that, but sure. But because, I want the content like it was originally made. I didn't like George Lucas redoing Star Wars. I liked it how it originally was. Yeah, well, I mean, he liked screwing his wife out of like royalties and stuff. So that like people act like he was doing this out of like pure creative genius, and it's like, no, he was trying to not give his wife money. Yes. That's true. But yeah, to your point, one point I'll make real quick before I get into the main point. I've seen a lot of people ask questions about like, oh, why is like this like Batman Golden Age like omnibus volume like 5's like $125 when like the last couple of volumes were $75 or something like that. And what people need to understand is the cheaper volumes are ones where they already did the restoration of those books. And if they've never reprinted the book before, they're building in the cost of that restoration into those books. So people can kind of understand like, oh, that's why it costs more money. I think people kind of forget about that, which is understandable. It is a factor. I mean, and that business side of things. Yeah. I mean, that I appreciate that. And I think, the whole topic of comics and sales and returnability and other things is one of those that is a real struggle sometimes, I think, for people to grasp. But yeah, I don't know. Well, I'm curious to get your answer, but I the other half of this is, by the way, you can easily go on to the, hey, things should just be reprinted as they are, and we should see history ugly as it was, because, on the other hand, I'm trying to picture, again, put yourself in the position of, some AT&T executive and I don't know why they'd be here, but they're off at the printer and they're watching, 50,000 copies of this crazy stuff come out of the printers that they now are going to distribute into the world. That wouldn't be a good feeling either.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is complicated because no matter how you slice it, someone can rightfully make the argument that, oh, you're profiting off of this racism. And it's like, you can't, while it's, you can defend it, but it also, it's like, it's tough. It is a gray area that's worth discussing. Beyond that, I don't think you can reprint that stuff without, like, I know people get weird with things like trigger warnings and stuff like that, but
yeah,
as someone who appreciates reading stuff as it was originally intended, I think it's doable to do that with the understanding that you're going to print this forward and make it very clear, like, these are not, this doesn't represent the industry today. There were things that, were printed that, like, we wouldn't print, today. And I think if you make that really clear to the reader and you make it clear that this is the original version, that there's a better argument to do that.
Yeah, I think I really don't like how this idea that the trigger warning, maybe it's because people just went too nuts with it, of using it, so much that it lost some of its meaning. But I do think that's the answer. I mean, to put something in there like, hey, obviously it's a different time. It's a way to kind of protect yourself, but also set things in context for people just picking up the comic and reading it.
Yeah.
Because it is jarring. I mean, I was going through Young Allies and I had forgotten this character. It's like, oh my God, they just used every panel to insert some kind of crazy racist thing. Like, yeah. I don't know why I had forgotten how crazy that was.
No, absolutely. I read years ago. I read some old, Golden Age Wesley Dodds Sandman from Adventure Comics, and it wasn't every issue, but, like, there would be things that were said that obviously you cannot say now, and situations that were shown. And I've also read. I have some collections of the Golden Age Phantom Lady.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff about that because it's, you got stuff during or shortly after World War II, and, like, her father's a senator, so she's in, like, Washington D.C. and there are so you can imagine. I don't have to go beyond that to explain what kind of weirdness happens there, but yeah, so you can imagine the kind of things that it wouldn't really fly today, and while I agree they shouldn't fly today, I think it's possible to reprint some of that stuff if you make it very clear, with things like a forwarded, like, the equivalent of, like, a trigger warning or whatever it is, to make it, not just to protect the company, but to protect the people, because, there could be people that just, pick it up and think, like, oh, I'm going to get this for my kid or something like that, that don't quite get it. And it could help,
It can. I mean, all people have to enter in comics at some point from somewhere, and everybody's a beginner at some point. You don't just start. A lot of us have been in it for a long time, so we understand some of this. But the Wonder Woman comes out in the theaters, and people go in. They're like, I'd like some Wonder Woman's comics, and maybe somebody's like, I'd like to start at the beginning, which is a normal response. I think that's one of the reasons why manga is actually doing well, because it's much easier to just start at the beginning. Like, there's clear ways for you to do that. And I think that if you start at the beginning with some of these books, one, good news, you've got a lot of material to read. That's great. But, bad news, some of the early Wonder Woman comics were nuts on multiple fronts.
Yeah, no, I mean, if someone was, running a store or anything like that, I would advise lie vigorously when it comes to something like Wonder Woman, and be like, oh, it starts right here after Crisis with George Perez, and nothing happened before that. Like,
yeah, I mean, it is. I don't know. It's funny to me, and then maybe because I'm an ass, I don't know, but I I enjoy taking like, one panel from Modern Wonder Woman where she's like, we must be inclusive and work with our neighbors, and then take a panel from like, Wonder Woman back in the 60s where she's just blatantly calling Asian people like super racist names. It's like, hey, these are kind of funny going together, aren't they? I mean,
yeah, I mean, look, I love Wonder Woman. The George Perez run for me is sort of like the gold standard.
absolutely.
I also really liked the Azzarello Chang run. I thought that was solid stuff. In terms of the New 52, I think that was one of the better books.
So I agree. We'll come back to that, actually. We'll finish your point, but I want to come back to this because I love that run as well.
Yeah, but the problem Wonder Woman comes into, which, I mean, this is a problem for a lot of different titles, but it's the same story over and over and over again.
Mhm.
It's the gods or her mother, the government lied to her, and she's so naive and trusting, and she's shattered, and now she has to build herself back up, and that's every single story with Wonder Woman, and it gets tiring after a while.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, and it goes to that difference. Man, there's so many things talking about. I think it's good because, well, I'm drinking. It's a good time.
Yeah, no, I'm really deep in this. So
I think that there's this balance between doing something new and bringing a new aspect to a character, or changing things up, defying reader expectations, whatever you want to call it, doing something new.
Sure.
And that has one route, or there's keep doing the same things, play it to classics. And in a lot of cases, this cultural battle over comics seems to be that seems to be one of the big talking points of, you're trying to change everything. Why don't you just do things the way they were? And it feels like if you lean too hard in either of those directions, it blows up.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to other creators and people like this about it for years. And one of the things that I think doesn't get talked about like enough in like settings like this is, when it comes to big two comics, basically something like Batman, if it was a TV show, it would be on season, what, 80, 81?
Yeah.
And it's like, can you imagine a show making it to like a scripted television show, making it to season 80 or 81 and being like, oh, this is great. I love it.
Yeah.
It's like, no, like it's incredible. It's an incredible feat that there was still good Batman stuff 50 years after Batman was created.
Yeah.
And the fact, like same thing with like Superman and characters like Wonder Woman. But the problem is, you sort of get stuck in a rut where it's like, you can never go past act 2.
Right.
You never get that third act with a lot of these characters. And when you get that third act, it's because you're immediately going back to act 1.
Right. Exactly.
And it's tough to do. And I think there's also a level of conflict that people have, understandably, that there's a certain age range of readers where the comics sort of grew up with them.
Right.
Like if you were reading something like Fantastic Four and Spider-Man in the 60s, those books, and I've read them,
Mm-hmm.
those books are written for particularly stupid children. Those are books that are for stupid children. And and it takes a while, but like by the time towards like Spider-Man, for example, because I like Spider-Man more than the Fantastic Four, although I love the Fantastic Four too, but like by the time you get to like the last few issues of Stan Lee and Jerry Conway's taking over the book, there's this maturing of the character.
That's true.
And if you were reading Spider-Man when you were a dumb 6-year-old, and now you're a reasonably intelligent 13 or 14 or 15-year-old reading it, you know, the book kind of grew up with you.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and then you can only grow up so much until you stagnate or have to go back down.
Right.
And a lot of these books got to a point and then they like went back down.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's where you get some of this, you know, like this book was great for me and now you made the book more childish, and this was something that was getting more adult with me, and I can understand that frustration.
That's a great point. I think, you know, I don't think that the either the comics, the publishers, the people, whatever the case is, I think there's that struggle of how do you age with the readers and how do you have the content stick, and then I think there becomes, and maybe it's because the industry is just too small, that, you know, you kind of, if you're a creator and you're pouring yourself into a job and maybe you're not paid the best, and then you got a bunch of fans pissed at you because you can't get the comic out the way they want it, but really you couldn't get the comic out the way they wanted even if you tried because of the nature of the character and the job and everything else.
Sure.
It just seems to lead to a kind of a vicious cycle where nobody wins.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. Not enough people talk about how, you know, this is, I'm going to get very cynical with you.
That's good.
Yeah. It's a miracle that any comic comes out at all. It's with, you know, having put out comics and work with publishers and know what other people go through, like it's unbelievable that anything comes out with everything that happens in just people's lives and trying to, like, you know, write something and edit it and get it drawn and lettered and get it out to the printer, and then like before you're even you know, like if you're a writer, you're like working on 3 issues at the same time. You're like you're plotting out an issue while you're breaking down another issue, and you're doing lettering passes on another issue, and it's just like it's a miracle anything happens. And I think some fans, you know, and me included, it's like sometimes you're like, I can't believe this mediocre comic came out. And you should just be like, count your blessings, anything came out at all. Like, that we get any comics ever. It's a miracle.
Speaking of which, you recently enjoyed the Chuck Austen run of X-Men.
I did. I never read it because I had good people in my life to tell me don't do it. And I finally, like, every once in a while, I'll go on eBay and I'll peruse and I'll look for, you know, something cheap. And someone had like the whole stack of trades, and no one was bidding on it for like $20. And I was like, this is amazing. A sign. This is a sign. Yeah. And I got it. And I
mean, it was a sign. I don't know.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I don't know if it was a good sign, but I got it, and then I read it, and you know, it just made me think. Like the weirdest thing about it is that I read this, and then like Chuck Austen like just sort of comes back into all of our lives because he's doing a book at Comixology Originals now. It's coming out like next week, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? You know, and
it's funny because when you said you had gotten those, I mean, and this is because I'm an asshole. I remember thinking I just had such glee. I'm like, oh, you're gonna love that. And
it was great. It was like the room of X-Men.
It was the room of X-Men.
You know, I'm also a big horrible movie fan. I love horrible movies. The Room, Samurai Cop, Birdemic. I watched again, mind you. I've already seen it after last season, like last week. If you can get your hands on After Last Season, it's a nightmare. I've seen every Neil Breen movie. I love that stuff. But
I'm with you. I have that same DNA, and my wife does not. And so you can imagine, like, why are you watching this shit again? I mean,
yeah, I have friends that get it, and I have friends that, like, you know, we'll hang out and we'll watch Suburban Sasquatch, for example.
Yeah.
and you know, stuff like that. And then I have other friends who are like, I think you're an idiot because you watch dumb things.
Yeah. I mean, I took my wife to see Fortress, and then I bought it because I want to relive that from time to time. I mean, that movie is incredible. There's a pregnant woman gives birth at the end, like the baby comes out and they run for their lives again from robots. I mean, it's like, how can you not love that? But you had the money comment, I think, which should be the quote on that book, which is, why was there so much Nurse Annie?
Yeah, there's a lot of Nurse Annie, and I think I quipped to you before because I've been catching up on X-Men because I don't value my time.
Sure.
And I was reading the most recent Hellions issue, which is really the Marauders and Just Shoot Me.
Right.
But you know, where Havoc uses glass or whatever and cuts his mouth open, and then he's trying to get with the Goblin Queen. And I think I had messaged you. I'm like, Nurse Annie's his one true love. What's this all about?
Yeah, true. Where is Nurse Annie? We've got
Where's Carter? Carter's one of the most powerful mutants in the world, apparently. So I've been told. So like, where's Carter in Krakoa?
I agree. He's got to be there, right? I mean, that means Nurse Annie's tromping about somewhere. I mean, maybe that could be the big Hickman reveal that she can't get onto Krakoa, so she's working with the evil Russian militant people over in X-Force. I don't know. Nurse Annie has to come back.
I get why she's not allowed on Krakoa because she hates mutants, but she has her reasons.
That whole, I love how they kept like, I gotta imagine, and Austin must have been thinking like, I've been too subtle with her dislike of mutants, so I need to make sure I return to that point in the comic. Like, what are you doing?
And we've talked about this before too. Like, Chuck Austin's done some incredible things. He worked on King of the Hill, which is a fantastic show. And I'm saying that as someone who actually enjoyed the show. Like, I'm not someone who's like, I really like the Luann communist memes. Haha. Like, no, I enjoy the show. And, he's worked on stuff like that. He worked on She-Ra, the new one. And I watched the first season of that. And it's a show, spoiler alert, not directed to guys in their 30s. So I didn't enjoy it as much as maybe some other people did. But feel free to enjoy it if you want. Whatever. Who cares?
Do you think? And this is one of the things I've had a hard time articulating, but I think you unlocked it for me in this. Is one of the things about comics, at least that I love, and is a part of comics for me, is joking and bagging on bad comics or comics we don't like. It's sometimes as fun as the good comics.
Oh yeah.
Today it seems really hard to do that. Like, if you go on and you complain about a comic, it turns into World War III very, very rapidly.
Well, it was different because you were bagging on a comic in a shop back in like 2012.
True.
And like the thing that shocks me to this day is people will tweet things and they'll just say the person's name, and then you'll get like a DM or someone will be like, I can't believe so and so came up in my mentions, and it's like, you mentioned their name.
Yeah.
And in a public space. Like, what were you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, the equivalency, you're right. The equivalency is when you're in a comic shop and you're talking about, I mean, who knows what. And it would be like pulling the creator somehow through time and space into the shop with you so they could listen to your rant. That's not going to be fun for the creator or, probably you in the long run.
Yeah, because one thing I think people really, they either downplay or they conflate into being this like bigger thing. It's like, sometimes what you don't like is the writer's vision.
True.
But other times it's the editor, and other times it's the group editor, and other times it's you know, the artists couldn't finish it and they had to get another artist, and then they did pages that didn't match and they had to go back and they had to re-letter it, and like there are so many reasons. And I think too often you get people who are like, oh, it's just the writer or just the artist or just this and that. And it's like, that's not entirely fair. And I understand you're gonna, if you are like ragging on a writer, for example, for like, oh, I hated this issue and they're such a bad writer. If that writer sees that and they're thinking about how they fought for the idea you had, but they were told by editorial they couldn't do it, they're gonna be more pissed off or upset than they may have been otherwise. Like you don't know, you know, and
it's true.
Yeah.
No, it's very true. And it's I don't know. It's I'd love to get back to it, but maybe in the world of social media, it's just impossible because it is fun to bag on stupid things in comics, because there are stupid things from time to time. It could have happened for any number of reasons, including, by the way, one you didn't mention is like nobody wanted this to happen, but they ran out of time, and so they vomited it out anyway.
Yeah, I mean, keeping a monthly schedule, you are putting train tracks in front of a moving train.
Yeah, exactly.
That is comics, and sometimes you're not going to get it right. You know, and it's tough, you know, and then other times Jubilee's a vampire and no one wanted that. Literally no one asked for Jubilee to be a vampire. And then we get that, and then they're just like, she's a vampire for years, and you just have to deal with it.
It was so weird that just lingered on. Like it was like nobody wanted to deal with it. Nobody wanted to fix it. Nobody just did. So it's just like, but they kept having her show up in comics to remind us that she's a vampire. And you're like I mean, I almost feel like there needs to be a Eisner or Ringo kind of award type category for the brave writer who goes in and just fixes just absolute garbage.
Yeah, you just needed the writer to go in and bless Iceman to stab her with some, like a holy water stake or whatever, you know?
Yeah. I mean, just some, I mean, just, and usually those stories aren't good because the writer is literally just kind of mopping up a bunch of blood on the floor. But you know, at least the damage has been repaired. Like there's a bandage on the patient and we can move on.
No, absolutely. Is Stacy X on Krakoa?
Yes, I believe she is. I'm almost positive she has shown up. Somebody in the chat can tell us, but I'm nearly positive. Doc would know, but I'm almost positive she has made an appearance there.
I feel bad that Doc has read enough to know that.
Yeah, he knows.
I'm sure he does too.
It is. Yeah, no, I'm absolutely absolutely sure. I look at this stuff and you know, there's the one that got me, and I'm always on it, is that picture I pulled out and I posted on Twitter, the picture of Batgirl. It was like her bathroom and the bathtub was in front of the door. And I don't know that I was the first, but I was early. And you know, ever have the thing where you tweet something and you go to sleep, you wake up the next morning and you like, you know, like 1,000, you know, likes. And my gosh, crap. You know, that's rarely a good sign. That panel made videos. I mean, but it was used as the destruction of all quality and control at DC and why the comic industry was about to implode. Whereas I just wanted to laugh because this panel was stupid and ridiculous, and we can laugh at it. Who knows? Maybe as an Easter egg, the artist did. Maybe somebody was busy. I mean, again, who knows why? It's just funny.
Yeah, like I've worked with editing a lot of different artists, and that kind of stuff can happen, and you have to kind of have a really keen eye and catch it early enough in the process. It's possible someone caught that the day it went to print, and it was like, well, too bad. Like,
yep,
you have to go to print. You know, but I've caught all sorts of like weird things kind of like that, because you know, when artists are just pumping out page after page after page, sometimes those kind of things do happen.
Yeah.
Like, and luckily with a lot of the stuff I've edited, I think I've caught a lot of that stuff. But I mean, like, I've seen stuff where it's like oh, this person had facial hair and then they didn't have facial hair in this panel and then they had facial hair again. You know, you see that kind of stuff from like artists who are just like pumping out stuff and just trying to get these pages out. Like it happens, you know?
And they've got to get that stuff out at that quantity because Greg Land's going to need it to trace later for his books.
Absolutely. I'm glad that he's making that money and not the people he's tracing, apparently. Speaking of which, you know, speaking of tracers and people that everyone hated, you know, I met Rich Buckler before he passed away, and you know, I really feel bad for that guy. I feel like I got to hang out with him in the studio and talk to him a bit, and he genuinely did not understand how he got blackballed from the industry.
Yeah.
And it's sad. That kind of stuff's sad, because then it's like, it is one of those things too where sometimes you have to put things in perspective, because it's like, okay, people like kind of like joked and stuff and like ripped on like Rich Buckler, and then he was sad and didn't get any work, and then he died. Like,
yeah,
put things in perspective. And you know, it's sad because he really loved comics. He really, like, you know, being in his studio, he had this statue of Deathlock, and he was showing me all these pages of things he wanted to do that no one was willing to publish. You know, it's sad stuff.
It is. I mean, it feels like the industry does a bad job on multiple fronts of mentoring is the wrong word, but kind of communicating. The transparency within itself seems broken a lot of the time. And I watch people come in and not really realize that they've made it in or why, not really realize, you know, what's going on. And then they find themselves out and they don't realize why they're out either. It just seems like this, like a conveyor belt from beginning to end. And not a lot of folks helping out people kind of find their way.
Yeah. And I mean, just a quick a plug here for Bob Wycheck. I don't know if people are aware, but Bob Wycheck has a GoFundMe right now because he's got bad glaucoma. And he is one of the kindest, sweetest people in the industry. I've met him multiple times. I have a Nightcrawler sketch from him, a Cosmic Boy sketch. He signed a bunch of my stuff. He is one of the absolute sweetest people. And he's going through a lot. He's a legend in the industry. If you can help him out and check out his GoFundMe and spread the word, that would be great. Yeah,
absolutely. I should put a link. We'll see if I can do two things simultaneously while I'm drinking. But yeah, I posted on Twitter, and I will do that. I need to do just a video on him. I think you're right. There's somebody who I've never heard a bad word ever.
Yeah.
And that's rare in this industry.
Yeah, no, he's an absolute sweetheart. I've met him on multiple occasions. He's one of those people, like, if you worked on Legion and X-Men, you're one of my favorite people on the earth. And he's one of those people. And yeah, he's so nice, and he's so generous with his time. He's just this incredible guy. And if he's in need and people can help him out, that's great.
I totally agree. I'll put some material. I'll put something in the description as well. That's a good cause. It feels like, in many ways, that the comic industry and the wrestling industry both. I know there's a lot of crossover of fans there.
Yeah,
they don't seem to know what to do with people. Once you're out of the spotlight, you wander into a very dark place very quickly.
Yeah, it's sad. I mean, you know, exactly like what you were saying with, like, you know, Bob Wycheck, and what I was saying with, like, Rich Buckler. And you know, I think I mentioned this to you before, but you know, it's sad, like, when you start looking through your books, you know, if you've been in this, you know, field or a fan for a while, you start getting more and more books on your shelf with people who passed away who signed them, and it's a real shame. Like, I have one of those Marvel Premiere hardcovers of the Ironmonger saga, and it's signed by Denny and Herb, and and rich, and you know, it's just sad.
No, and I think that's why maybe some of the tension exists. If you think about the big picture and you think about, social media is relatively new. You have people who, for a while you couldn't just scream at somebody, and now you can. They can certainly mute and block and all that stuff, but generally you're out there. And then on top of that, you have this kind of ticking clock that I suspect, even if people aren't aware of why it's happening, they're aware that the clock is ticking. And so you put all those things together, it's an ugly combo, and it should be for something fun. I mean, comics are escapism and should be wonderful, good fun, and it just gets tied up into all that nonsense. It's tough.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes people need to like put those things in perspective, and these are all human beings, and we only have so much time on this earth, and and obviously similar to wrestling, I mean, there are so many examples like Mark Grunwald and people like that, Michael Rango and other people who died way too young, so it's like a lot of that's like also like, come on, let's all kind of like not get crazy with some of this stuff. Like there are absolutely reasons to be upset about certain things, but some of these things, it's like, just don't let it get to you like that.
Yeah, I mean, the tension just there needs to be a tension valve that goes off, and maybe it's tied into current politics and everything else. But I'm not completely convinced. I've heard a lot of people now say that, hey, if we can just make it through this election, and the right guy wins, and who, depending on who's talking, the right guy varies, then everything will be okay. And man, I'd love for that to be the case, but I have my doubts.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love that to be the case too, but it's like, regardless of who's in the White House, we can be decent people to each other. Like,
oh man, that's well said.
Yeah, like, but yeah, and I'm kind of going to use this to segue into, some of the other people I like to talk about are, other people that are forgotten in this industry. I mean, Rachel Pollack, her Doom Patrol run and all of that.
Oh yeah.
I love Rachel. I've worked with Rachel on a number of projects. I brought her in for Deadbeats. I reunited her with not only Richard Case, but John Workman from that Doom Patrol run. And she also had a story in mind. And we're working on other stuff as well that can't be announced just yet. But I mean, she has an important place in comics. She was the first out trans woman to write at the Big Two, and was the only out trans woman, I think, to write for the main DC continuity, as in like outside of Vertigo and stuff like that, until like fairly recently.
Why do you think? I don't want to put you on the spot with it because it's a dodgy question, but why do you think that DC or Marvel or whoever it might be, why don't they take more? I don't know if the word is pride, but why don't they recognize stuff like that more? Because in a lot of cases, they were really progressive on this stuff, and they just rolled it out. I mean, there wasn't. It just, there's some accomplishments that were made there.
Yeah,
it feels like they kind of just gloss over now in favor of getting some press maybe in the last 12 months. And it feels like they're leaving a bunch of people behind who actually did do a lot of really amazing work.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to that. I don't think a lot of people realize, like, Rachel Pollack was out writing Doom Patrol in 1993 with a trans character, Coagula.
Right.
Kate Godwin was the character's name, who's named after two different trans activists. And, up until recently, was the only trans superhero at the Big Two at all. I think there was a character in Supergirl who might make it into the comics. I don't think she's in the comics yet, or she just premiered in the comics, but really, that was it. And while she was doing that comic, I mean, Coagula's first appearance, she was up against this character Codpiece, who was this sort of representation of toxic masculinity, and this is back in 1993.
93. I mean, that you gotta kind of underline that a little bit, because it's this was because I remember selling that comic. And because I'm old, but I and there was an audience. I didn't have people coming into the shop going, "How dare you sell that?" or "How dare you not buy it?" Or, I mean, people just buy it. There's people who bought it, people who didn't buy it. It was all pretty chill, and I wasn't in a super progressive neighborhood at that time. I was in Colorado, and Colorado was red politically at that time. But it was just there. And I think these accomplishments are cool. Pollock did amazing work. And it feels like this idea to constantly reinvent the first time to do things. And I think that I can't speak for other fans, but it always irritates me that people make a big deal out of current accomplishments when you've got 20 years earlier pretty cool accomplishments.
Absolutely. And I mean, the interesting thing too about Codpiece is he was also a riff on Silver Age Green Arrow. Knowing Rachel, we've talked about this sort of stuff, and that instead of like Rachel having this like, what was it? Instead of, Codpiece having a bow and arrow, it was like he was shooting these things out of this giant codpiece.
Right. Well, sure.
And
they do,
but she really understood comics. I mean, she was a big Jack Kirby fan. Rachel Pollock is also Jewish, and Jack obviously was Jewish, and there's a lot of talking. Jack sort of is inspired by his religion in a lot of his personal works, and she also pulls in from that. I mean, Rachel Pollock was an Arthur C. Clarke award-winning novelist before she did a single comic. And then world-renowned tarot expert, and Linda Medley, who took over after Richard Cates. I think Scott Easton did issue 70, which was Coagula's first appearance, but Linda Medley was doing some of the work before that and after that, and they're genderqueer, and they won, I think, multiple Eisners for Castle Waiting, which wasn't DC, it was indie work, but you had this non-binary, gender fluid person in the 90s who was winning Eisner Awards for their fantasy work. And then you also had Maddie Blaustein. I don't think she was published under that name. I think she was still using her dead name at Milestone at the time, but you had Death Wish, which had a trans character. And this was also around, this was basically right after Coagula. I think this was also in 93, maybe 94.
I think it was 94, yeah.
Yeah, and this was, some of the earliest J.H. Williams III work. And that's not collected, and that boggles your mind, because, I mean, J.H. Williams III will sell, and then you also have Caitlin R. Kiernan in the late 90s, who took over the Dreaming and the character Echo.
Right.
Who isn't trans in the in what you typically think. This was a character who was a transvestite while they were alive, but then when they had passed on, they were a woman in the Dreaming and all of that. But these are trans women who were writing comics in the 90s, and there's more than one. And
yeah, it makes me feel like if there was more of an acceptance of the past. When I say the acceptance, I mean from the publisher, not the fans. If there was more of an acceptance of what happened, I think that it would make a lot of things go down. I don't know if "go down" is the right word, but make it often feels like a cheap publicity stunt to me, and it feels like. Which is a shame, because I do think there's some really legitimate, talented creators out there who are trying to put out good work, but Absolutely. Then they get used they get used is how it feels like, to say, hey, we've got Snowflake and Safe Space coming out, or whatever happens to be, and it always feels so disingenuous. And I also think that's what a lot of the, not all, but that's what some of the fans are reacting to. Not necessarily that, maybe there's a lifestyle that's represented they don't agree with, but more that I say shoved at people, but it's promoted over history. I mean, comic fans have history, that most people do know these things, and they want that respected. Genuine. Yeah, so he's got it. It doesn't feel genuine. That's the problem. It feels very, very manufactured. And I think comic fans tend to pick up on that very quickly.
Sure. I mean, there is that sort of element to it. Another thing Rachel wrote was, New Gods. She had like about a year run on that book, and it's very interesting. That's another book that John Byrne basically was like, I want to do New Gods now, so they hired the creative teams and gave John Byrne the book. But which isn't to take away from all the great things John Byrne's done. I love X-Men, I love Fantastic Four, and all those things he's done. But it's interesting, all of the interpersonal sort of stuff that happens. But yeah, you see these sort of things happening now, and I know that Snowflake and Safe Space were brought up and all that, and I mean, that's the kind of thing that it's hard for me to talk about personally, because I do know Daniel Kibblesmith. He's a friend. I absolutely adore Daniel. He's been
Sorry.
Big Yule.
Well done, Yule. That's
yeah. So that was very good. But knowing Daniel and all of that, like, it's funny because you can try to do a good thing and it doesn't work out, and there are times where people are genuinely thinking they're doing something that is good, that people are gonna like, and it doesn't work out. And I think Snowflake and Safe Space sort of falls into more that category than the, like, sort of more malicious, like, we're just going to take these idiots' dollars kind of thing. That,
yeah,
I think I think there were people who thought it was like, oh, you're just trying to take these, like, dummies' money and stuff like that. But it was really more people genuinely thinking they were doing something good and it not working out. And it's hard not to feel sympathetic for that.
No, I agree with you completely, and I think that the interesting thing about that title and everything else is that I remember, I think I did a video on it at the time, the press and the little video that they did on it. It felt like they were asking, they being Marvel, not Kibblesmith, but they were asking for trouble, because it was worded and phrased in such a way that it's like it was like they were trying to poke at people. I mean, it came off really bizarre, which had nothing at all to do with the actual book's creative team. And it kind of reinforced that feeling of, this isn't genuine. This is just very transparent marketing. And so I don't know what that book, I have a suspicion, and the people in the chat can roast me over it. I have a suspicion that that book actually probably would have been a pretty entertaining commentary, based on the people involved. I think I don't know, or maybe it's been terrible. I have no idea, but I think it would have been kind of sarcastic and a lot different from what was portrayed. But the marketing for it was just seemed very tone deaf to problems the fans had, that I think we're all getting lumped into, well, the only people who have problems are kind of these toxic fans. But, you have fans in there who are bothered because they're spending $5 for a 22-page comic book, or the creative teams are bouncing around, or 500 other things. And I think it just kind of collided with that.
I think people also don't necessarily get, and it's not, I'm not necessarily blaming them either, but you have these creative teams like Daniel and Luciano with, that New Warriors book. They're not part of the marketing team. They don't control the articles that CBR and Newsarama write or any of that. So you have these people who are like genuinely like, oh, we're gonna do this comic, and like, oh, maybe something nice will happen, and maybe we'll tell a story that like a few people will, smile and feel better about themselves. And then you get all of these articles and these headlines and all of these things, and it gets blown out of proportion, and you get these creators who are like, what's happening?
Right,
And
exactly.
I think that's where a lot of the friction sort of comes in. And it's not just this book, it's with a lot of other books, because you have these creators, they're like, I'm not in good. I didn't say that this book was this. Everyone else did. I'm just writing this book, or I'm just drawing this book, and all these other people are coming in. And I think that's where you get these, creators who are sort of taken off guard and are like, what is going on? Like, and they get upset because they were just trying to do a good thing, and now they don't even understand why everyone's yelling at them and doing all these things. And it's like, what's happening? I just thought this was, I was just trying to do something nice.
I'm just trying to make my $5,000 here, folks. Let me.
Yeah, exactly. And you see this sort of thing happen, and like, it just devolves into all of this craziness that could have been avoided if there was more of that. But I mean, this goes back a long way. I remember, what was it, Gail Simone taking over Wonder Woman, and there were articles that were written that were like, Gail is the first woman to ever write Wonder Woman, and she never said that, and she wasn't.
Right.
But like, you end up getting heat, being like, what's going on? Like, you're not the first woman. She's like, I'm not, and I know I didn't write the article. It's
Yeah.
And I remember at the time she was saying like, Mindy Newell was the first woman to write Wonder Woman. It wasn't me. That's not So I feel like creators sometimes get sort of stuck with some of these write-ups that aren't necessarily reflective of how they feel. And Mindy's a friend, and I absolutely love Mindy, and I wish her contributions to Wonder Woman were more celebrated. But at the very least, they did include her in that Catwoman anniversary, which was really great, because she was also the first woman to write Catwoman, and I thought that was really important too.
Yeah, I mean, but it all goes back to, I think there's decisions that the publishers make that seem strange, or maybe they're just too busy, or they're not paying attention, or you've got somebody who's overworked and underpaid and they don't think about all these. I mean, there could be a million reasons for it. But like you mentioned, I don't know, like half an hour ago, there's different layers here. There's the writer, the editor, the artist, the coordination of all those things, the group editor, the publisher themselves, the marketing department. And if any one of those groups, and increasingly, I think it's people outside of the core books creative team, if they make a mistake, then it's almost like their hands are washed clean from it, and it all just rolls downhill onto the creative team to take the heat. And
yeah.
I mean, it doesn't escape. I do, and I've said before, and I know people argue with me, I don't think that excuses people from going on YouTube and making kind of hate rants for 20 minutes about it. I think that's just adding to the fire. But it's a lot of noise that has nothing to do with the actual book.
Yes.
I'll take a drink here and we'll have fun.
Yeah, no, it's crazy what ends up catching fire, what ends up getting people riled up. And we've talked about this before too, where like sometimes people will hang on to things like, for example, they'll hang on to like typos or something like that in a comic, and yell at editorial, or be like, oh, whoever this editor is an awful editor. And it's like, well, when you're dealing with like the big two, and even some of the larger, more indie publishers, they have interns and proofreaders and things like that work for them. That's not the editor's purview to be proofreading that. And also, when you look back at all the old like Fantastic Four comics, there's typos in every issue.
Oh yeah. Yeah. This isn't a new problem. I mean, you can argue that it should be fixed, and maybe we need to figure out how to do that better. But this isn't something that just started a year ago. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, there were people that acted like certain editors were what the harbingers of typos, and
right.
it's like that's no, like I can't tell you how many typos I've read in like Silver Age Marvel books, like
Yeah.
constant.
Stanley had a ton of errors. I mean, love the guy, much respect, but of course, those books have a ton of errors, and in some cases, they would reprint books, try to fix errors, and then make them worse. I I remember a bunch of Fantastic Four trades of some of the early run, like somehow they made the problem worse, and I have no idea how that happened, but.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the classic mistakes is the cover for issue 3 of Fantastic Four, where Johnny Storm has 2 left hands.
Yeah, no, exactly.
You know,
And it's a long lasting. It's hard though, because I've done it before. I've said, hey, this problem has existed in the past, and one of the big pushbacks I've got is, oh, so you're saying it's okay now? It's like, no, I'm saying it's happened forever. That's different.
Yeah, there's a difference from saying it's okay than saying like this isn't new. Like,
right. And I would hope it relieves some of the tension for people to realize that a lot of these things we're talking about. I mean, maybe it's the pessimist in me. They have existed for a long time. This isn't a new problem, so we can kind of take a deep breath because the world didn't fall apart 5 years ago. It's glass half empty, glass half full. The world's been falling apart for a while.
absolutely no. I mean, it's exactly right. Like they've always been making these mistakes. They've always been having these sort of problems. They aren't new. And if anything, we've seen arguably better art. I mean, that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah.
When you read like that old Fantastic Four, for example, that like Jack Kirby's doing, I mean, he was drawing what, 4 or 5 comics a month. So like you'll go page after page and there's no backgrounds.
Right.
Like, hot take, that's unpublishable today.
Right.
Unpublishable. People would not stand for that.
Yep.
And there are people who will say things like, "Oh, we got to go back to like this," and it's like, "Well, you couldn't publish that today."
Well,
We
yeah,
can't go back to that.
I always we'll hit two hot button topics for the chat here. The first, people go with we got to go back to the 90s. I mean, I can tell you as a comic store owner, that was not a great time. That was I mean, there were some good moments in there too, but there were some terrifying moments in the 90s.
Absolutely. And I'll tell the chat right now, the book I have next to me that I'm holding is an out-of-print trade paperback of DC versus Marvel Comics, the one with Ron Mars and Peter David, Dan Jurgens, all that shit.
Yeah.
That's what I got right next to me. So
you're gonna need that whiskey.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like the 90s. It's like a lot of it's really bad, but
there's there too. There's both. It gives and it takes away.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have the whole like Absolute Sandman collection, for example. I think that stuff's great. When I think of Spider-Man, I think of Todd McFarlane and Eric Larson.
Yeah.
Those are like, outside of like, the classic stuff. If we're not talking about, Ditko, Romita Jr., Gil Kane, Ross Andrew, then I'm thinking about Todd McFarlane and Eric Larson.
Yeah.
So, I get that.
No, it's true. I have to do this for Ben David is pointing out, well, maybe some things are getting published without backgrounds.
That's fair.
That's fair.
I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Like
your point stands, though. There's a lot of things in the 60s, I think, that we look at maybe with rose-colored glasses, and if you looked at it today, it's like people would be losing their minds or wouldn't be published.
No, absolutely. And like, I don't have anything personally against Liefeld. I did meet Liefeld once at a signing. I have a picture with him and everything. But you know, what I always think of when I think of Liefeld is an early book making fun of him, Doom Force #1.
Yeah.
That it was mostly Walt Simonson art, I want to say. And I actually have a copy of that book signed by Grant somewhere.
Oh, awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've got a picture of Liefeld and a bad story as well. I had somebody take the picture, and I you know, he's at the table, and I said, hey, make sure you back up enough or you're going to cut off the feet. And then I went, like that to Robin. He did not appreciate it. So anyway.
I can imagine. All of you, if you want to do something fun later, go on YouTube. There's like the Dennis Miller show that Rob was on when he was like 24. Like Young Bloods just came out. And Dennis Miller asks Rob Liefeld who like the Hulk's like nemesis was, sorry, I've been drinking a lot. Who the Thing's nemesis was, and he goes, the Hulk. And like Dennis Miller's like, no, it's the Yancey Street Gang, and like just dunks on Liefeld like that. And it's wonderful. I suggest everyone watch that. And really, there's a few other like morning show sort of segments that are on YouTube of like Liefeld, and like, you know, everyone talks about the Gene commercial, and I get it, and it's wonderful. You should also watch the Gene commercial, but like those like morning talk shows that like Liefeld's appearing on it,
they're awesome as hell. A lot of
yeah, because he's 24 and he's
but they're funny.
No, it's hilarious, and like these people are just asking him things like, you know, so like, how do you like manage your money or manage your business? And he's just kind of like,
we'll worry about that later.
Yeah, no, it's
these guys, terrific productions, they'll work it all out.
Yeah, it's just incredible. Is it terrific production instead of productions? Like, I feel like they were a stickler about something.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's terrific production because they're only going to get one. I don't know. That's a wonderful like clown show thing to watch. But more people. I wish that like the arguments over, you know, some of the names people are bringing up kind of old tweets from mags or other things, and they should just redirect that dunking on terrific production. That's where it belongs.
They really should. I mean, like that, and oh my god, you know, some other things too. In the past few months, because we live in hell now. Right. I don't know if you're aware of this.
Oh, I'm not aware. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're in hell. I mean, you're literally in hell.
I'm looking at an orange sky right now. It's amazing.
Yeah. So to get a little bit of hell on my end, you know, I've rewatched the Ultra Force cartoon, the Wildcats cartoon, Savage Dragon. Really, really like just sucking in all of that 90s cash grab stuff.
Yeah.
It's great. It's great when you watch Wildcats because it's Jim Lee's Wildcats. It says it right there at the top of the screen.
You had to get that credit in.
Yeah. You know, and I know I mentioned this to you before too, but I'm like, when is IDW going to give us the Jason the Wheeled Warriors reboot that we're all dying for?
That's a licensable property just waiting to be picked up.
It's waiting. You know, like if anyone from IDW is listening, you want to give me Jason the Wheeled Warriors. You want to give me the Stone Protectors. Remember Stone Protectors when they tried to make troll dolls for boys?
Oh yeah.
I had the action figures, you know. I'll write some Stone Protectors. I'm right here. Come on, hit me up. But
we've got to ruin that childhood.
We do. Every single cartoon you ever watch should be ruined.
Yes, at least twice.
You shouldn't be allowed to enjoy a single thing.
Now, if She-Ra is rebooted in like 10 years and there's a new cartoon, but it ruins childhood, which childhood is it ruining? Does it ruin both in perpetuity, or is it just the earlier childhood or the later childhood? Like, which childhood gets wrecked?
I want it to ruin everyone's childhood.
That's the right answer. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that gets me with She-Ra is, and here's a hot take for you: the original She-Ra wasn't very good.
That's everyone's take.
You know, it's.
I feel there's a correlation though. To me it always comes down to the messaging around the product. Like when the new She-Ra came out, it felt like there was a dare or a bet to see if they could piss off fans, and it's like nobody will care about She-Ra. So let's see though if we can get them pissed off, and sure enough, people jump at that bait. But it's like, I mean, I remember watching the first cartoon with my kids, and they're like, "Why is the animation quality so terrible?" Like they need to learn from the Japan people. Like that they do much better animation than this. This animation's awful, and they never stuck around for the story. They never stuck around long enough to have the childhood ruined because they couldn't stand the art.
I get that. I mean, really what I remember from like the original She-Ra is like that, like Pegasus or whatever had a really deep voice.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
That was weird. And I remember ironically watching the drug awareness episode High. But but I do that with a lot of 80s cartoons. Like there was that Thundercats episode where like the one, like I forget which Thundercat it was. It wasn't Lion-O, it was one of the stupid ones. But he was like obsessed with this like orb, and it was like all this like it was a drug metaphor.
Sure.
And that was stupid. Remember Defenders of the Earth?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, there was that like stupid anti-drug episode where like Flash Gordon's son was like a junkie or whatever.
That was government money.
That was great. It was like his fucking junkie son. It was fun.
I don't know. When you have kids, of course I want to. I'm like, let me show you kind of the old Transformers cartoons, the G.I. Joe cartoons. The one like these were these were amazing when I was a kid. And then you put it on, and your kids are watching that, and you're watching that, and you're like, oh, this is not aged well at all.
You know what has aged well, and I will die on this hill.
All right.
That original animated Transformers movie.
Yeah, the Optimus Prime dying movie.
Yeah, where it killed me as a kid.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, they got the rock anthem, you got the touch, and I mean that it was.
I love that song. You know, you got the touch, and God, what was it? There's so many great songs. There's the Weird Al song.
Yes.
There's that like nothing's gonna stand in my way.
Yes.
Not tonight. Like there's that, and it's a great movie. And then there's the G.I. Joe equivalent, which is not that great.
No, that one was awful, and it followed it up, and it was somehow we got Cobra Commander turning into an actual snake in that, and it's like, what the fuck is this? Like, go back to Transformers.
He just keeps going like, I was once a man. And it's awful. The best part of that movie is like the intro where they're like saving the Statue of Liberty. Like, that's great.
Yeah. Yes.
But,
action, and then it just goes right off the cliff.
Yeah, no, it's a shame. But yeah, like cartoons suck. This is where this is going.
True. This is why we should read more comics. This is the whole thing. So I can't go with one chat. Nobody's mentioned the chat, so I'm very shocked. We're talking about all this history and problems in comics and things that need to be saved. And clearly, if you want to save things in comics, there's one guy you got to call. And you know who I'm talking about, right?
It's Jim Shooter.
It's Jim Shooter. Yeah, absolutely.
You gotta call Jim Shooter. Right before I rant about Jim Shooter, I will say, for you people who might not be educated with Jason the Wheeled Warriors, which I don't know who raised you.
I mean, come on. Yeah,
come on. Get with it. They were the original guys fighting plant monsters before the Avengers and the X-Men.
That's true. They defined that plant monster.
All those Avengers and X-Men comics you love right now, you can go right back to Jason the Wheeled Warrior.
There was a toy line. There was a good 65 episodes. I had no idea.
Yeah, and the person who developed that, J.M. Straczynski.
Oh, Jesus.
You know? before he ruined Gwen Stacy forever, he did all that stuff with Jason the Wheeled Warriors.
Oh my God! Yeah, sorry, I'm now going down the rabbit hole. I'll get away from that. But yeah, it is true. I think if you want to know where X-Men is going, it's clearly Jason the Wheeled Warriors. That is what it.
You heard it here first.
It's true. It's true. So Jim Shooter. Jim Shooter is a complicated one for me because I've met Jim Shooter multiple times. He is a nice guy, at least when you're at a con. Not working for him, but when you're meeting him there, he tells a lot of great stories. I think he's got a pretty good because he's out of the industry, he can kind of speak very bluntly about problems within it, which a lot of people can't. I think that's what enamors a lot of people to him, because others feel like they can't say what he says, and he just said, because why not? And Shooter did reign over a time of growth for Marvel, but I maintain, and I know I'm the odd man out always in every conversation, I don't, if you suddenly plucked Jim Shooter up and then put him into Marvel and said fix things, I don't think he fixes things.
No, I mean, I get what you're saying, and I agree with you in that he's too far removed at this point to be in a position where I think he has the network to change those things.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and like I've met Jim Shooter on a number of occasions. I saw him speak about Superman with Paul Levitz at the Jewish Museum here in New York. I've met him at cons. I've had him sign Legion stuff because I love Legion so much, and he's the one that I'm gonna, God. I mean, he created Princess Projectra and Karate Kid and the Fatal Five, and great stuff.
Yeah.
And
for sure,
and I don't know if some of you know this, but there's a Legion story that's like pseudo-autobiographical. I think it was collected in the 9th volume of the Legion archives, but I'm not 100% sure. It's where he is basically an insert for Matter Eater Lad.
Oh, yeah.
And he has, like, it might have been Duo Damsel, like, drop him off, like, a block away from his house. And he goes into his house, and the story is about how his like dad's a drunk and his mom's asking for money and needs more money, and it's just like, is this all you gave us with the check? You got to work more and stuff like that. And it's all actually pseudo autobiographical that he like hid into this Legion story.
I think Shooter wrote a ton of great stuff. I do think he deserves a lot of credit for a lot of things he's done. I definitely was he ran a stricter shop by a mile. I think there were a lot of circumstances that went on in the 80s, and I think Shooter maybe right now is getting credit for things that I just think there's some other names in there. I don't think it's just Shooter.
No, yeah, it's not just Shooter, and also like I've read some of those, like I read a lot of the early Valiant stuff. I've also read a lot of the stuff since Valiant's come back. I have so many trades and issues of Valiant stuff. And some of that Valiant stuff that like he wrote or co-wrote or had a heavy hand in is a little wonky, that some of that early stuff. With like Harbinger and things like that. But that was also making me remember how people kind of acted like Faith was this new sort of character, and Faith is this like SJW kind of character that came fairly recently, and it's like, no, that Faith, the same like overweight woman who is a big fan of superhero stuff, is in the original Harbinger.
Yes, that's true.
I mean, she appears like really early on. It's like issue 2 or 3 or whatever it is, like super early on in Harbinger, in the original Valiant run. And I always thought that was weird when people would like focus in on Faith and be like, Valiant's doing all this SJW kind of stuff. And it's like, no, Faith is, they're just doing literally the same character from decades ago.
Yeah, it goes back to the same thing. We've been saying it over and over. It's this stuff is not as new. The new to me seems like the marketing feels somehow more half-assed than it was in the 80s and 90s, which blows my mind.
Yeah, I mean, some of that is just not understanding how to navigate social media and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, we can talk about that with, you know, I feel like fans and creators alike don't understand how to really navigate that right and understand boundaries and.
Oh no, I agree. No, and it aggravates me because it's you know, I'll post a video on Charity, the new GM.
Sure.
And it's the same video, and I'll get one person coming in saying, "Hey, you're a crazy racist for saying anything negative about the guy," and I'll get a comment immediately below it saying, "You're giving, you know, why are you one of the SJWs that is giving this guy all the credit? You know, you should hate him more." And it's like, I don't even know how to navigate that anymore. It's the same.
No, I mean, and I think I sort of agree with you on this, where it's just like, we can't even judge anything this guy's done yet, because nothing he's done or implemented we've seen yet.
No, exactly. And I mean, everybody makes judgments. You look at things and you try and kind of assess where things are going to go. But I think I don't know. Maybe it's the age of social media, and everybody just expects that we live in a 24-hour cycle where, you know, all actions can be taken within a day. But the business, nothing works that way in real life. I mean, and we know it. We live in real life, so I don't know why we think social media is an indicator of how things work in real life. I don't know. I need to drink.
No, because you need to dunk on people to get that dopamine hit.
Yeah, the dopamine sucks. I'm just saying.
But no, it's all about, you know, dunking on people and getting likes, and that's what it's really about.
That's where the money comes. How about I like this comment because I think it relates to a few things we've said, that, you know, it feels like one thing's comics as a business has lost is some people, and not just Shooter, but like Louise Simonson, like Bobby Chase, who was recently let go. There's people with decades of kind of industry knowledge and experience. It doesn't feel like the big two are using them particularly for that experience, or at least having them help guide, mentor, and grow. Do you think that there's a world where the indies or the smaller companies kind of take this baton and run with it?
Maybe I'd like to see some of that. And another name that I don't see thrown around as much. I've seen the name thrown around, but like Larry Hama, same thing.
Yep.
There are certain people who have those editorial experiences that end up they go to shows all the time, like Danny Fingeroth.
Yes.
You know, Jim Salicrup. I mean, Jim Salicrup's busy with paper cuts, but he's one of my favorite people on the earth. I absolutely adore Jim Salicrup. And it's not just because he edited some of the greatest Spider-Man comics of all time. Not only Spider-Man comics, but I'm going to rant about Jim Salicrup for a minute because I love Jim Salicrup.
Please.
Not only did he edit some of the best Spider-Man comics ever, he edited like the beginnings of the John Byrne Fantastic Four run. He edited X-Men during the Dark Phoenix saga. He started a little before that and went through it. He edited one of the John Byrne things that gets forgotten about the most, which was that like brief, like 9-issue run that he drew of Captain America with Roger Stern writing.
Yep.
Jim Salicrup edited that. He edited some really great Iron Man stories. But yeah, like people like that. I mean, who have that kind of experience.
It feels like they could help navigate this stuff for people who are new coming in and set up to fail. I you know, no judgment of names or anything else, but I mean, you look at a guy like Donny Cates, for example, who's, you know, skyrocketing into Marvel and is one of their biggest names now. They're banking a lot on him. What are the odds that, you know, that career is protected and managed and helped in such a way that 10 years from now, that's still a big name? Or, you know, and I'm not pointing him out specifically, but just history shows us that there's a far greater chance that in 10 years he's been burned and rinsed out and there's somebody new that they're using. I mean, it feels like this would be a really powerful thing for the creators, let alone the companies.
So much of this is tough because the way things work with how creators navigate the field is constantly changing. And I think there's too much emphasis on like, oh, creators do this and then do this. And it's like, it's always renewing itself and it's always changing and growing, because like what we're finding out with DC right now, and some other things, it's like, because of corporate oversight and all that, at this point, we might be looking at an end to the kind of exclusive contracts we've been seeing.
Seems that way.
Yeah. So like, we might be looking at a different way to navigate sort of a creator trajectory. You might be looking at more creators who are going from indie to big two back to indie, which has been the case for a little bit, but it's done in different ways. Where like you're like in like a Rick Remender or something like that, where you get an audience at Marvel, and then you hope you all you need is like a fraction of that audience to follow you to like Image, and you're set.
Right.
I forget who told me this. It might have been Fred Van Lente or someone like that. Or it might have been the guys who did. It might have been Brian Clevenger who did 8-Bit Theater, which was one of my first web comics that I was really obsessed with when I was in high school. Who went on to do Atomic Robo, which I love. But this idea of, if you can get like 3,500 like diehard fans, you're kind of set. And that's to say that's like the minimum. Like anything you do, you'll get these like 3,500 people to back you in like a crowdfunder, or pick up your indie book, or buy your merch. Then you can use that to kind of transition into being like a full-time creator kind of thing.
It is. I mean, I think that this career path for people, I think there's a bigger chance that they fail than succeed. But it feels like with just a little bit more structure or help or mentorship or any of these things, not only would maybe we'd have a maybe better relationship with the fans and the buyers, but a better chance that career can go well. I don't know. We went down an interesting path, and so.
And to build on the cynicism, outside of comics, literally anything you do in your life has a better chance of failing than succeeding.
That's true. That is true.
Literally anything,
including life itself, which has a 100% chance of failure at some point. So
yeah, you will 100% fail at life eventually.
Yeah.
That's just how it works. But it's a miracle that you've done anything.
We brought the room down, unfortunately. But hey, on the bright side, Bendis is off Superman. So yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's tough, because it's like you want to care about a lot of this stuff, and then a lot of it makes you not want to care.
Yeah.
And it's
that's true.
So we'll see. But maybe Superman will get better. Maybe it won't. Maybe Nurse Annie will end up with Havoc. Maybe she won't. Like, it's
anything can happen.
Literally anything can happen. And usually, if anything can happen, it's more the bad thing than the good thing.
Yeah. We do that. We need Jubilee to become a vampire again. That's
finally. Why isn't she a vampire now? Also, isn't she still wearing that stupid jacket from like the 80s?
It's got to be really smelly at this point.
It's like it's weird that some of these characters, like, also, I'm just going to throw this out here, because I feel like we don't, people don't talk about this enough. The only reason anyone cares about Jubilee is because of the 90s cartoon.
I think that's all. Well, I think that, and I do think that the character hit in Claremont's run, where they're in the Outback, and we hadn't seen some new characters getting created. It was something new and different. He hadn't brought in a Kitty Pryde-like character in a long time.
Sure.
But, and I think, but yeah, the 90s cartoon did sell it. I agree with you.
I feel like there are people who got into it because of that run, but there's a lot of people now that are like, they care about Jubilee and Rogue and Gambit having a relationship and things like that because of the 90s cartoon.
That's true. I agree with you. I agree with you.
I'm not saying it's good. I hate it. But I love the cartoon. I'm just saying I hate that characters like there are certain characters from that cartoon that got this like inflated sort of importance later on because of the people that came in that were fans of the cartoon.
Yeah, I agree with you. We're probably wrapping up soon. You've given 2 hours of your time, which I really appreciate. I drank through half a bottle of whiskey.
I only drank through like a third. Yeah. But it's a lot because I really didn't eat a lot today, and it's a lot of booze, and I was drinking wine earlier.
You've been you've gone the wrong direction. That's not the right way.
I mean, that's life, though, isn't it? I mean, that's like a profound way to look at life.
That's true.
You know?
That's true. I wanted to ask you two things. One, I've done it. By the way, I apologize to the folks in the chat, and we've been up and down. I know YouTube's having some streaming issues. Not me, I promise. It's YouTube, but we had some good audience and some people turnover. So thank you. If you have enjoyed this, please do like or dislike. Well, do whatever you want. Actually, it doesn't matter to me. You can like, dislike, or just do both if you could. You can.
Yeah, I don't care. Like me if you like me. Don't if you don't. Whatever, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way.
There you go.
I've done a terrible job in answering the questions, which is that's okay, or bring them up. But I've got two for you. So first, kind of what we were just talking about. Whoops, I got the wrong one. See, I've been drinking. There you go. That was a good quote too, though. Do you think a mentorship program first of all, would new creators even go for that, and would the veterans try and kind of Virgil them to some extent by gouging what the mentorship program would cost? Do you think there's a way though that new creators, veterans could? Do you think there's any merit to this?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of that stuff's important. I think you need to learn from other people who have been involved really at any point in the industry. There's always something you can learn from anyone, whether they're tapped into the industry now or not. And I know I've asked advice from people who are not tapped into the day-to-days of the industry right now. Like I've met with people like Mike Gold, for example, on multiple occasions for just advice. And people who aren't familiar with Mike Gold, he was a group editor at DC for a while. He started and ran First Comics, which is really like a precursor to Image that doesn't get talked about enough. John Sable's one of the best comics ever written.
Yes.
But I do think new creators, there needs to be this sort of balance and understanding of reaching out to people who have been in the industry for a while to sort of get advice and to get sort of brought into the industry. But, you do need to learn some of the business side. It's terrifying how many people aren't aware of the business side and aren't aware of like page rates and common practices and things like that.
I got a request from a writer artist who shows up in the chat every now and then to cover the story of Stephen Platt, and that is the more I've dug into it, and I'm continuing to try and get data out because of this. The story can't end the way the story is going. It's a nightmarish story of a guy who kind of came in, achieved semi-superstar status very quick, and then fell as quickly. There's a ton of stories out there like that, though.
No, there are, but I mean, I think that there's this balance because when you're trying to make it in comics, you're usually rising up with a peer group.
True.
And you need to tap into a peer group and rise up together. But you also need to be aware of people who are a little bit ahead of you. And it's the people who are just a little ahead of you who are going to give you the best business advice because they're the most tapped in to information that's going to be most relevant to you. Because, I love Wheezy, for example. I think she's one of the greatest people on earth, and I've met her on so many occasions. I have so many things signed from her. I worked with her on mine. I told her she needed to get a banner because we were at a convention once together, and she was like, "Oh, you know, it was people keep telling me to get a banner, but I don't think people would care about that. What would I even put on a banner?" And I had to tell Wheezy, I'm just like, "Wheezy, what are you talking about? You should get a banner." And I'm like, "You could put Apocalypse, Cable, and Steel on that banner, and people know it and appreciate it."
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if she has or not, or there's no rush, obviously, right now.
Right.
But yeah, she'll eventually do shows again, and she should get a banner. And she is criminally humble.
Yes. Yeah, that's the truth. I mean, there's a ton of people I really admire from the 80s, 90s, and then and not just that time period, but Louis Simonson, both of the Walt as well,
Yeah.
are some of the most humble people I've ever met in my life, considering the impact they had to the industry.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I think Wheezy in particular has had such a gigantic impact on the industry. And she is just so like, "Oh, it was just doing my job," kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
she always plays herself down. So if you really want to win over Walt, if you see Walt and Wheezy's there, you praise Wheezy.
Yeah.
And Walt will give you that nod, like
Yeah.
you're a good person.
No, I think because he's seen the opposite a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, and I say this as someone who bought and read Judas Coin, which I think everyone forgot about, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that was a fun book. Um, but yeah, Walt obviously Walt is great,
Well,
and Walt
speaking,
also great because Legion of Superheroes, because Paul Levitt seems to like drag him in to do like a fill-in like every 10 years or something like that.
I wish he was doing it right now.
Right?
So, where do you think? Two last things. So, one, we kind of talked about briefly earlier, but I've drank a lot of whiskey now. I don't remember. But
Fair.
who would you have on Legion now? Let's assume that Bendis, January solicitations come, and that's his final issue too. Because why not? Who takes over Legion and makes that a great book in your book?
Oh God. I mean, I have so many different ways of thinking about Legion. And I'd kind of want to lean in a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
I think like a good way to do Legion right now, and I'm thinking of this in part because of this is kind of what I would probably do to do something different, is it's like lean into that like retro future,
Yeah.
lean into the James Dean like Rebel Without a Cause kind of idea.
Yes.
Really lean into this idea of these are teenagers who have way too much power, kind of like when teenagers got cars in the 50s,
Mm-hmm.
and do something where it's like they're being enlisted into this like Earth military basically as a way to kind of like rein in their irresponsibility.
Oh, that'd be an incredible take.
Right? I
Um,
think that would be fun.
That would be so much fun. You get a bit of a Starship Troopers vibe, a little bit out of it, and
I'm doing my part.
yeah, exactly. That
Yeah.
would be a great palate cleanser as well, too.
Yeah, that's how I'm approaching this. Is I'm like,
Yeah.
completely different take, and do something like that.
So along those lines, somebody asked like an hour ago, and I never got to it. But it's a good way to end.
Uh-huh.
What are your favorite? Like, you got 3 books. What are 3 things? What are your favorite? That's a hard one. But just what are 3 books you absolutely love that you think people should read?
I think one of these is going to be 2 books that I'm putting into one.
Great.
And I've mentioned this to you before, but I'm blanking on their names. But these are 2 French graphic novels, Beautiful Darkness and Satania.
Yep.
It's the same creative team. Both of those books are gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous, and they are so dark and I love it so much.
I do not know how to pronounce this author, but I will put it up here. But yes, that is such a good recommendation. So I'll do that.
I think everyone would benefit from reading those two books because they're just so good. Another one that I always recommend to everyone, if you ever want to do anything superhero related, don't do it unless you've read James Robinson's Starman.
Yeah,
you have to read the whole run. It's one of the single greatest superhero runs of all time.
I totally agree with you, and it's I mean, for a while there, there was some hype around it. Hype's the wrong word, but I mean, they were keeping it in print. But it's fallen completely off the map now, and I think it reads. It hasn't aged. It reads great.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's elements of it where it's like, obviously that's the 90s and all of that, but you know, I own an original page from that run, and it's just it's blows my mind. It's so good. I've read it so many times. I got the I lucked out while it was still in print, and I got all 6 omnibus hardcovers of it, and it's just unbelievably phenomenal. I can't recommend it enough. Everyone needs to read Starman if you like superheroes.
Yeah, that's a great superhero book.
Yeah, it's a great superhero book. It's a great DC book. If you like anything that DC's doing, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And then, geez, like there's just so many comics, you know. And then
Nurse Annie.
Yeah, and then anything with Nurse Annie, anything, and any you go through those, back issue bins. Anything with Nurse Annie, you pick it up. But
you need to build a character with the toys of Nurse Annie, where you could like get a piece of her for each one of the toys, and you could build your own Nurse Annie. That would have been a good toy, you know.
Yeah, no,
yeah,
absolutely. But
that sounds very morbid.
No, absolutely. And then if there's a third thing, it's it's always tough. I could recommend a million different things. I'm about to reread Black Hole because it's been a while, from Charles Burns.
Yep.
And that's something I think everyone should read. From a personal point of view, I'm going to get to another one that I'm going to recommend, but there's 2 more books I'm going to say. This is personal. Howard Cruz was a friend and mentor of mine. I own multiple pages of his original work. He passed away this past November.
Yeah.
I was cat sitting for a friend of mine who was also a friend of his, and was surrounded by his original art when I got the information that he had passed away. The last email Howard sent to me was talking about how much he liked this one short historical romance comic I did, and hoped I would do more comics like that in the future. I cannot stress to you how incredibly kind and open Howard Cruz was as a comics creator. Incredibly humble, never ever made you feel like you weren't in comics. He was such a pleasure, and there's so few people like him. He did this graphic novel, Stuck Rubber Baby, and First Second just put out 25th anniversary edition that he passed away before he got to see.
Oh, we've lost some really good people in recent. I mean, that's always kind of true of the state. There's been some really, really powerful people that we've lost in the last year or so.
Yeah.
And
and that's not to take away from all the other people that passed away. I mean, Denny O'Neil, like, you need to read The Question. That 36 issue run he did with Dennis Cowan is unbelievable. Everyone needs to read that. And John Sable freelance, obviously, from Mike Grell, but you gotta read Stuck Rubber Baby from from Howard Cruz. It's just this gritty, raw tale of being gay in the South in the 60s before the civil rights movement. It blends the queer rights movement and the race rights in the South, and it's gorgeous. The whole book, he labored over that book for years. It's the inks are, every page is gorgeously inked, and he did everything by hand, and it's a phenomenal read. I think anyone, no matter who you are, would benefit from reading Stuck Rubber Baby. And then I also just have to say, Will Eisner's A Contract with God.
Yeah.
I think, the spirit's great. I think the way he handled A Contract with God, and in particular the whole trilogy, I suggest reading the trilogy in its entirety. The way Will Eisner breaks down panels and just the way he approaches comics is so gorgeous and unique. You need to read it and understand it to get a better understanding of how comics work.
I can't agree more. Hey, so we've gone through some whiskey. I really want to thank you for coming on and talking to us. I know that in these, these sensitive times where it seems like all sides are not understanding each other very well, I really like that you came on, gave a lot of chit chat, loved it. Lots of people really thanking you for coming, and I've just really enjoyed talking to you. I think I could do this for another 3 hours. I've got to head out your way, get some whiskey. We'll have a great night.
No problem. And I'll eventually get out to Seattle again. I have my 94-year-old great aunt lives out on Bainbridge Island, and I need to go out and see her again. She's wonderful. So I'll eventually get out that way.
Well, wherever we meet up, beers on me, or whatever we were drinking. And but thanks again, and for all the people in the chat, thank you very much for coming and being part of the conversation. It was great. People watching this on replay, hope you enjoy it, and have a great night. Thanks for listening.
Great. Yes. Thank you all. Really.